You know that feeling when your entire world shatters in an instant? That gut-wrenching moment when you realize the people who are supposed to protect you, the ones you call family, are actually your biggest monsters? That's where my story begins. One minute I was sitting at a family dinner, just trying to answer a simple question, and the next, an explosion of pain ripped through my face. My mother, my own mother, had just smashed a wrench into me. They all just laughed. "At least now you're pretty," my sister Madison sneered, clutching her stomach. Then with a chilling smirk she added, "I think one hit wasn't enough." Mom, still holding that damn wrench, actually tossed it to her like they were playing some twisted game of catch. "Well, you have a go." As I scrambled, desperate to get away, my father grabbed my hand. His grip was an iron vise pinning me down, and then everything went black. The fluorescent lights of the hospital emergency room seared my eyes as consciousness slowly returned. My face throbbed with a pain so intense, so all-consuming, that even breathing sent fresh waves of agony through me. Every pulse of my heartbeat was a hammer against my skull. A kind-faced nurse leaned over me, her voice muffled and distant, like I was trapped underwater. "Miss Harper, can you hear me? You've suffered significant trauma to your face. We need to know what happened." Through a haze of pain medication, forming words felt impossible. My jaw felt wrong, horribly misaligned. The left side of my face was swollen beyond recognition. I tried to lift my hand to touch it, to understand the damage, but the nurse gently stopped me. "Don't touch it, sweetheart. Your orbital bone is fractured, you have a severe concussion, and there's damage to your cheekbone and jaw. The police are here. They need to speak with you about how this happened." Police. The word cut through the fog in my brain like a razor. I blinked slowly, memories flashing: Madison's smug face, Mom's cold eyes, Dad's iron grip. A guttural whisper escaped my lips, each word sending fire through my mangled face. "My family," I choked out. "They did this." Detective Sarah Chun, a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes, pulled up a chair. "Take your time, Miss Harper. I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me everything." And so, through tears and pain, through a morphine drip that slurred my words, I did. I told her about the dinner that had destroyed my life, the dinner that had been building for years. Started like so many others. 3 weeks before, Madison had called, her voice dripping with an almost childish glee, to announce she was bringing her new boyfriend home for Sunday dinner. Madison was 26, 2 years my senior, and had always been the golden child. In our parents' eyes, everything she touched turned to gold, while I remained perpetually invisible, perpetually disappointing. I drove to our childhood home in suburban Connecticut, a modest 2-story house that, for me, held nothing but bad memories. Madison's silver BMW was already gleaming in the spot closest to the door, a symbol of her favored status. Inside, Mom was setting the table with her good china, the set reserved only for Madison's special occasions. Dad sat in his recliner watching football, offering me a grunt that barely registered as acknowledgement. Nothing new there. I'd learned years ago that my presence barely made a ripple in their lives. 15 minutes later, Madison swept in, her new conquest in tow. His name was Travis, and he was objectively handsome in that generic all-American way: tall, athletic, perfectly styled brown hair, and a smile that seemed just a bit too practiced. He wore an expensive watch and designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Everyone, this is Travis Mitchell," Madison announced, her voice practically tripping with pride. "He's a senior investment banker at Goldman Sachs." Mom practically swooned. Dad, astonishingly, got up from his chair to shake Travis's hand with genuine enthusiasm, something he had never done for anyone I had ever dated. The favoritism was so blatant it would have been funny if it hadn't cut so deep. We sat down, Madison and Travis, of course, positioned at the center of attention. I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, the spot reserved for the family afterthought. Mom had made pot roast, Madison's favorite, even though she knew I'd been vegetarian for 3 years. The conversation flowed around me like I didn't exist. Madison talked about her promotion, her upcoming Bali vacation with Travis. Mom and Dad hung on every word, asking questions, laughing at Travis's mediocre jokes, playing the part of proud, doting parents. I pushed the vegetables around on my plate, trying to make myself smaller, a skill I had perfected over 24 years of being the unwanted daughter. But then Travis turned to me. His gaze had been flickering in my direction throughout the meal, and I had noticed but tried to ignore it. Now he was looking directly at me, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So, Emily, what do you do?" It was a simple question, polite, even the kind of thing anyone would ask at a dinner party. But the moment the words left his mouth, the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "I'm a social worker," I said quietly. "I work with at-risk youth in New Haven." "Oh, that's interesting," Travis said, seeming genuinely curious. "What made you choose that field?" I opened my mouth to answer, to explain how I'd found purpose in helping kids who felt as invisible as I once had, when Mom's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't waste Travis's time with your boring stories, Emily. He's just being polite." Her tone was sharp, dismissive, But I've been spoken to like that my entire life. I should have known better. I should have just nodded and stayed quiet. But something in me, some tiny spark of defiance I didn't know still existed, made me continue. Actually, it's really rewarding work. Last month, I helped place a 16-year-old girl who, I didn't see it coming. One second I was speaking and the next there was an explosion of pain across the left side of my face. The impact was so sudden, so violent my brain couldn't process it. I tasted copper. Blood filled my mouth. The chair tipped backward and I crashed to the floor, my head hitting the hardwood with a sickening crack. Through blurred vision I saw Mom standing over me. She was holding a wrench, one of Dad's tools from the garage. Her face was twisted with rage, with a hatred so pure it stole my breath. "That's what you get for talking back," she hissed. "Who do you think you are? Embarrassing your sister in front of Travis." The pain was indescribable. I could feel something broken in my face, feel blood pouring from somewhere. My vision swam. I tried to push myself up, but my arms wouldn't cooperate. Then Madison's laughter cut through the ringing in my ears. High-pitched, delighted, cruel. "At least now you're pretty," she shrieked, clutching her stomach as she laughed. Did you see her face? Oh my God. Travis was laughing too. Not an uncomfortable, nervous laugh, but genuine amusement, like my pain was the funniest thing he'd ever witnessed. I tried to speak to ask why, but my jaw wouldn't work properly. Blood bubbled past my lips instead of words. Madison's face appeared above me, her eyes sparkling with malicious glee. "I think one hit wasn't enough." Mom smiled, actually smiled, and tossed the wrench to Madison like they were playing catch at a family picnic. "Well, you have a go." Terror, raw and primal, gave me a surge of strength. I tried to roll away, tried to protect my head with my hands, but Dad was suddenly there. His massive hands clamped around my wrist, pinning me in place. I struggled, but he outweighed me by 100 pounds. "Hold still," he said calmly, as if telling me to sit for a photograph. Madison raised the wrench. I saw it coming down toward my face, saw the sick excitement in her eyes, and then nothing. When I woke up in the ambulance, I genuinely thought I had died. A paramedic leaned over me, speaking urgently into a radio. The siren wailed. Everything hurt. "Stay with me," he kept repeating. "Stay awake." Okay, we're almost there. Later, I learned a neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had heard the commotion, looked through the dining room window while walking her dog, and witnessed the whole thing. She called 911 and then pounded on the door, interrupting whatever else my family had planned. Detective Chun photographed my injuries, took my blood-soaked clothes as evidence, and promised my family would face consequences. The next morning, despite doctors' protests, I insisted on seeing myself in a mirror. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. The entire left side of my face was purple and swollen to twice its normal size. My eye was swollen shut. Stitches traced jagged patterns across my cheek and forehead where the wrench had split the skin. My jaw was wired shut. But my one visible eye? It burned with something I had never felt before. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Not just betrayal or hurt. No. What I felt was a cold, calculated determination. They had tried to break me, to destroy me, but I was still here. And they were about to learn that the daughter they had dismissed their entire lives was far more capable than they ever imagined. By the way, if you're still with me after all that, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, there are more unbelievable stories coming, and you won't want to miss them. Within 24 hours, the police arrested all three of them. Mom, Dad, and Madison were charged with felony assault, with additional charges of conspiracy and attempted murder under consideration. Travis was brought in for questioning as a witness, but he was soon charged as an accessory after the fact for not calling 911 and trying to help them create a cover story. My hospital room became a command center. Detective Chun visited daily. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Flores, came to discuss the case. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyewitness testimony, combined with my injuries, made it one of the most clear-cut assault cases she'd ever seen. But I wanted more than just criminal charges. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness, the same humiliation they had inflicted on me my entire life. From my hospital bed, I made calls. The first was to Daniel Kraus, a former colleague's husband who specialized in family law. He arrived within hours, took one look at my face, and his expression hardened. "We're going to destroy them," he said simply. "Tell me everything." And I did. Not just about the assault, but about the lifetime of abuse, neglect, and favoritism that had led to this moment. The birthdays forgotten. The graduations my parents skipped because Madison had a soccer game. The Christmas when I was 12 and received a single pair of socks while Madison opened gift after gift. The time in high school when I made the honor roll and Dad told me I was showing off. Daniel took notes, his pen moving furiously. "This is a pattern of abuse," he said. "We can use this. Have you documented any of this?" My eyes widened. "I kept journals," I admitted. "Started when I was 14. Every instance of being ignored, belittled, or hurt. I just needed somewhere to put all the feelings." His eyes lit up. "Where are these journals?" They'll be crucial evidence for both the criminal case and the civil suit I'm going to file. Over the next week, as my face slowly began to heal, Daniel built our case. He retrieved my journals, had them copied and authenticated. He interviewed former teachers, old neighbors, anyone who had witnessed the differential treatment. He gathered financial records showing my parents paid for Madison's entire college education, while I took out loans. He even found the college fund my grandmother had left for both of us, only to discover my parents had given my share to Madison to buy her BMW. The evidence was damning, overwhelming. A paper trail of parental betrayal stretching back decades. Meanwhile, the criminal case moved forward. My family hired expensive lawyers, claiming it was an accident, that I had provoked them, that I was mentally unstable and had hurt myself. But then Mrs. Rodriguez testified before the grand jury, describing in bitter detail watching through the window as my mother hit me with the wrench, as Madison prepared to strike me again, as my father held me down. She described their laughter, their smiles, the casual cruelty of it all. The grand jury indicted all three of them on multiple felony counts. Travis's fancy marketing firm put her on immediate leave. Dad's construction company dropped him. Mom lost her position on the church board. Their perfect lives were crumbling, and I watched it happen from my recovery with grim satisfaction. But I wasn't done. Daniel filed a civil lawsuit seeking damages for assault, battery, emotional distress, and a lifetime of abuse and neglect. We sued for $800,000, a number calculated based on their actual assets and future earning potential. They don't have that kind of money, Daniel told me, but they have equity in the house, retirement accounts, Madison's BMW valuables. We'll take everything. The depositions were brutal. Daniel was merciless, pulling out journal entries, photographs, school records. He brought in my high school guidance counselor, who testified she had suspected abuse but couldn't prove it. He found my pediatrician's notes expressing concern about my low weight and withdrawn demeanor as a child. My mother cried during her deposition, playing the victim. I don't know what happened, she sobbed. I just snapped. Emily has always been so difficult, so ungrateful. Madison was defiant. She was ruining my relationship with Travis. She always tries to steal attention from me. Dad barely spoke, just sat there looking empty, defeated, probably realizing his retirement savings were about to disappear. The criminal trial came first, 10 months after the assault. I had to testify, had to sit on that stand and recount the worst night of my life while my family stared at me from the defense table. My face had healed, but the scars remained, thin white lines that would mark me forever. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Mom got 7 years. Dad got 5. Madison got 6. Travis got 2 years probation and community service. The courtroom erupted. Madison screamed that it wasn't fair, that I had ruined her life. Mom wept. Dad just looked empty. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Walking out of that courthouse, the world looked different. The sky seemed brighter, the air cleaner. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was carrying a boulder on my shoulders. The weight of their abuse, their judgment, their constant dismissal had been lifted by 12 strangers who had looked at the evidence and declared what I always knew. I was the victim and they were monsters. The media picked up the story within days. Local news ran segments about the House of Horrors in suburban Connecticut. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, outside my parents' house, even outside the hospital where I'd been treated. Everyone wanted to know how a family could do such a thing to their own daughter. I declined all interview requests at first, but someone leaked my journals to the press, and suddenly excerpts were being published. People read my 14-year-old self's desperate attempts to understand why my parents loved Madison but barely tolerated me. They read about the Christmas morning when I was 16 and found an empty box under the tree with my name on it, while Madison opened a new laptop. The public outrage was immediate and intense. Social media exploded. Strangers sent me messages of support, sharing their own stories. Some people recognized me on the street, telling me how brave I was. It was overwhelming, strange, and somehow validating in a way I never expected. But not everyone was sympathetic. Madison's friends started a social media campaign, claiming I was lying, that I had always been jealous, that I had somehow orchestrated the whole thing to destroy their perfect family. One of Madison's sorority sisters, Bethany, went on a local radio show and called me a manipulator. Emily was always weird, she said. Always playing the victim. Madison told me years ago that Emily made up stories for attention. I listened to that interview in my lawyer's office, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles went white. Daniel watched me, probably worried I might do something rash. Let me handle this, he said. I'll send a cease and desist. If she continues, we'll add her to the civil suit for defamation. But something shifted in me during that interview. I realized that staying silent was no longer an option. People needed to hear my side directly, in my own words, not filtered through journalists or court transcripts. I called a press conference for the following week. Daniel tried to talk me out of it, worried anything I said could be used against me, but I was done hiding. I had spent 24 years making myself invisible to keep peace in a family that hated me. Never again. The press conference was held at a community center in New Haven. I wore a simple navy dress and minimal makeup. My scars were visible, thin white lines that caught the camera lights. I'd spent an hour that morning deciding whether to cover them with foundation, but ultimately chose to let them show. They were part of my story, proof of what had been done to me. The room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the seats. I stepped up to the microphone and took a breath. My name is Emily Harper, and I want to tell you who I really am. I began, my voice shaking slightly, but I pushed through. I'm not the ungrateful daughter my family claims. I'm not a liar or an attention seeker. I'm someone who survived 24 years of systematic emotional abuse, neglect and favoritism that culminated in my mother, father and sister trying to kill me. I spoke for 20 minutes without notes. I talked about growing up invisible, about watching Madison receive everything while I received nothing. I talked about the small cruelties that added up until I believed I deserved to be treated like I was worthless. I talked about the moment I realized my family didn't just dislike me. They actively wanted to hurt me. When I finished, the questions came rapid fire. How did it feel to testify against my family? Did I regret reporting them? What did I want people to know? I want people to know that family abuse is real and insidious, I said. It's not always visible bruises. Sometimes it's being systematically erased, being made to feel like your existence is an inconvenience. And I want other people who are experiencing this to know that it's not your fault, and you deserve better. The press conference went viral. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Major news networks picked it up. I was invited on national talk shows, though I declined most. The story became bigger than just my family. It became a conversation about covert abuse and the way some children are scapegoated by their own parents. My phone rang constantly. Old acquaintances reached out, many apologizing for not noticing what was happening, for not intervening. But the most surprising call came from Travis Mitchell's wife, Christina. She reached out through my lawyer's office, asking if I would be willing to speak with her. We met at a coffee shop in Manhattan, neutral territory. Christina was elegant and composed, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. I need you to know I had no idea, she said immediately, about Travis and your sister, about any of it. I thought he was working late all those nights. I'm not sure why you wanted to meet, I said carefully. I don't know anything about your marriage or Travis beyond what happened that night. Christina wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I wanted to meet you because I'm divorcing him, and I need to understand who I was married to. A man who could watch what your family did to you and laugh about it. I need to know if there were other signs I missed. We talked for 2 hours. Christina told me about Travis's controlling behavior, his need to always be right, the way he belittled her. She found messages on his phone from multiple women, not just Madison. She told me how he gaslit her when she confronted him, making her feel crazy. Your courage in pressing charges helped me find my own, she said. I saw you at the trial testifying about what they did, and I realized I didn't have to stay with someone who scared me. We exchanged numbers and stayed in touch. Christina became one of my first clients when I eventually opened my law practice. I helped her navigate her divorce and fight for full custody of her children. Travis fought it, of course, but his criminal record made things easier. No judge wanted to give custody to a man who had stood by while someone was beaten unconscious. The civil trial preparation consumed the next several weeks. Daniel and his team worked around the clock. They interviewed everyone from my childhood teachers, neighbors, my pediatrician, even the parents of friends I had played with. Mrs. Henderson, who lived 3 doors down, testified she used to see me sitting alone in the backyard for hours. Emily was such a sweet child, she said. But she always seemed so sad. I asked her mother about it once and she brushed me off. My 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson, came forward with records. I documented concerns about Emily every year I taught her. She came to school without lunch regularly. Her clothes were often worn or didn't fit properly. Meanwhile, I had her sister a few years later, and Madison always had the best of everything. I did report it to Child Protective Services twice, but they closed the case. The parents were good at putting on a show, and there were no physical injuries back then. The system failed Emily. Every piece of testimony, every document, every photograph built a picture of a childhood marked by intentional exclusion and emotional cruelty. Daniel organized it all into a presentation that made my parents' lawyers visibly uncomfortable during depositions. My mother's deposition was particularly revealing. Daniel had a gift for asking questions that seemed innocent but backed the witness into corners. Mrs. Harper, can you tell me why Emily's bedroom was significantly smaller than Madison's? Madison was older. She needed more space. But when Madison moved out for college, did you give Emily the larger room? A pause. No. We converted it to a craft room. So you chose to make a craft room rather than give your younger daughter more space? Emily never asked for it. Did Emily ever ask for anything that you gave her? Another longer pause. She knew money was tight. But money wasn't tight for Madison's Sweet 16 party, was it? I have receipts here showing you spent over $8,000 on that event. Did Emily have a Sweet 16 party? Emily said she didn't want one. Do you have any evidence of her saying that? Silence. Daniel pulled out one of my journals already entered into evidence. Your Honor, I'd like to read from Emily's diary entry dated 2 weeks before her 16th birthday. Madison's Sweet 16 is in 3 months, and Mom has been planning it for half a year already. I asked if I could maybe have a small party for my birthday with just a few friends from school. And Mom looked at me like I had asked for $1 million. She said, "We'll see," which is what she always says when the answer is no. I don't know why I even asked. I should know better by now. My mother's face went pale. Her lawyer objected, but the damage was done. They tried every legal maneuver to reduce the damages. Their lawyers argued that monetary compensation couldn't undo the past, that my family didn't have the resources, that I was being vindictive. Daniel's response was methodical and brutal. The defendants had resources to fund Madison's college education, purchase her a luxury vehicle, and provide her with every advantage. They chose to exclude Emily from these benefits despite having equal responsibility to both children. This wasn't poverty. It was intentional deprivation. We've calculated their total assets. They have the means to pay. He brought in economic experts and a child psychologist, Dr. Reynolds, who had reviewed my case files. The research is clear, Dr. Reynolds explained. Children who are systematically favored over their siblings develop entitlement and narcissistic tendencies. But the scapegoated child often develops complex PTSD, depression, anxiety, and a deeply damaged sense of self-worth. Emily's journals show classic symptoms of this dynamic. She internalized her parents' treatment as evidence of her own unworthiness rather than recognizing their abuse. The lifetime cost of therapy needed to address this level of trauma can easily reach 6 figures. Additionally, scapegoated children often struggle professionally and personally, which affects earning potential and relationship stability. The ripple effects are enormous. The defense tried to argue that I seemed fine, that I had a job and apartment, that I was functional. Daniel countered by having my therapist testify about the severe anxiety and depression I had battled since adolescence, the eating disorder I had developed at 15, the self-harm I had engaged in at 17. Emily learned to hide her pain because expressing it was dangerous in her family, my therapist explained. She became an expert at appearing fine while internally she was falling apart. That's not resilience, that's survival. During a break in the proceedings, I went to the courthouse bathroom and locked myself in a stall. The weight of having my entire childhood dissected in public was crushing. Every painful memory was being dragged into the light, examined, cataloged as evidence. It was necessary, but it was also excruciating. I heard the door open and 2 women entered, their voices echoing off the tile. Can you believe this case? Who does that to their own kid? I know, and the sister is even worse somehow. At least the parents are old and set in their ways, but the sister is young. She knew better. Did you see the mother's face when they showed those journal entries? She looked like she wanted to disappear. Good. She should be ashamed. They left never knowing I was there. Never knowing their casual validation meant more to me than they could imagine. For so long I had wondered if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive, too needy, too much. Hearing strangers recognize the abuse without prompting helped silence that cruel voice in my head. The civil trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury heard from dozens of witnesses, reviewed hundreds of pages of documents, and saw photos of me at various ages, always on the periphery of family photos, always slightly out of focus, as if even the camera couldn't quite see me. The closing arguments were theatrical. My parents' lawyer painted me as vengeful and money-hungry. Daniel's closing was quieter but more powerful. He showed the jury a photo of me at age 7, sitting alone at a birthday party while Madison opened presents. "This is Emily on her own birthday," he said. Madison had just opened a gift that was supposed to be for Emily. Look at her face. Does this look like jealousy? Or does this look like a child who has already learned that she doesn't matter? He walked them through my entire childhood, year by year, instance by instance. "The defendants want you to believe this is about sibling rivalry," he said. "But this isn't rivalry. Rivalry implies competition. Emily was never allowed to compete. She was simply erased." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman looked directly at me as she read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. $3 million in damages. To collect the judgment, the court ordered the sale of my parents' house, the liquidation of their retirement accounts, the seizure of Madison's BMW and her savings. Everything they had worked for gone. But money wasn't enough. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to be erased, to be nothing. The execution of the judgment was handled by a no-nonsense woman named Margaret Hoffman. She was efficient and merciless, which suited me perfectly. I was allowed to be present when they inventoried my parents' house for sale. I had Daniel come with me for legal protection, but also for moral support. Walking back into that house for the first time since the assault felt surreal. The dining room had been cleaned, of course. No trace of my blood remained on the hardwood floors, but I could still see it in my mind, could still feel the impact of the wrench, could still hear their laughter. The headaches from the traumatic brain injury I'd sustained made the memories even sharper somehow. Like my damaged brain had crystallized that moment in perfect, terrible clarity. The neurologist had warned me the migraines and occasional memory lapses might be permanent. Margaret's team moved through the house, cataloging everything of value. Mom's china, the set she had used for Madison's dinner with Travis, was packed. Dad's tools, including wrenches, were inventoried. Madison's childhood trophies were left behind. They had no resale value. I found myself in my old bedroom. It was exactly as I had left it years ago. A twin bed with a faded comforter, a small desk, walls painted a dingy beige. Through the wall, I could hear Margaret's team in Madison's room, which had been twice this size, with an attached bathroom. On impulse, I opened the closet. A few old clothes still hung there. But in the back, behind a box of old textbooks, I found something that made my breath catch. A small wooden box, the kind that might hold jewelry. I pulled it out and opened it carefully. Inside were treasures from my childhood. A dried flower from my 8th grade dance that I had gone to alone. A ticket stub from a movie I had saved my allowance for months to see. A birthday card from my grandmother, the only person who had ever seemed to genuinely love me. And beneath those items, more journals, ones I had forgotten about from my earliest years of writing. I flipped one open and saw my 10-year-old handwriting. Today was Madison's birthday party. Mom said I could help serve cake. I said maybe I could have a party too when it's my birthday. Mom said we'll see. She always says we'll see. I took the box. Margaret noticed but said nothing. These were my possessions after all. As we left, neighbors watched from their windows and yards. Some looked away. Others stared openly. I wondered how many had known, had suspected, and said nothing. Mrs. Rodriguez was there though, standing on her porch. She gave me a small nod and I nodded back. She had been the only one brave enough to act. The house sold quickly despite its dark history. A young couple with a baby bought it, unaware or uncaring. I hoped they would fill it with love, that their child would grow up feeling wanted and valued. Perhaps it would cleanse the place. But watching someone else move into my childhood home brought unexpected emotions. Not nostalgia. I had no happy memories there. Rather, a strange sense of finality. That chapter was truly over. The building that had housed my misery would be someone else's fresh start. Madison's BMW was auctioned off. I attended, sitting in the back row. It sold for $42,000. I thought about all the times Madison had pulled up in that car. How she had treated it like a badge of honor, proof of our parents' love. Now it belonged to a stranger who just wanted a good deal. My parents' retirement accounts were emptied. Dad had worked construction for 40 years, building his 401k slowly and carefully. Mom had worked part-time as a bookkeeper. Combined, about $350,000 gone in an instant. I thought about Dad's face when the court officer served him papers at the prison. He had aged a decade in the months since his arrest, his hair now completely gray. For a moment I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered his hand clamped around my wrist, holding me still, and the feeling evaporated. Madison's savings account of $12,000, everything she had managed to save, was seized. So was her jewelry, including the diamond necklace our parents had given her for college graduation. My graduation gift had been a card with $50 inside. But the most satisfying part was the social destruction. The money was important, but watching their reputations crumble was its own reward. Mom's church formally revoked her membership. Dad's union brothers turned on him, giving interviews saying they were disgusted. Madison's college sorority disavowed her, removed her name from their alumni directory, and returned a donation. Travis lost everything too. Goldman Sachs fired him immediately. His professional reputation was destroyed. I hired a private investigator, Marcus Rivera, not just to dig into Travis's marriage, but to track all of them. I wanted to know where they were, what they were doing, how they were surviving. Some might call it obsessive, but I called it self-preservation. These people had tried to kill me. I needed to know they couldn't hurt me again. Marcus was expensive but thorough. He provided monthly reports with photographs and detailed information. Dad in prison kept to himself. He'd been jumped twice by other inmates who had heard what he'd done. Apparently even criminals have standards. Mom struggled more, unprepared for incarceration. Madison, after initial trouble, adjusted, got a job in the prison library. Travis moved back in with his parents, working as a customer service rep. A humiliating step down. Marcus' photos showed him haggard, defeated, gaining weight. Each report brought a grim satisfaction. They were suffering consequences. They were living diminished lives. They were experiencing a fraction of what they had put me through. But I was building something better. With the settlement money, I first paid off my student loans. Nearly $80,000. The freedom of being debt-free was intoxicating. Then I bought myself a condo in downtown New Haven. A beautiful two-bedroom with exposed brick and huge windows. I furnished it carefully, each piece chosen intentionally. It was the first space I had ever inhabited that felt truly like home. I also invested a significant portion, working with a financial advisor to build long-term security. Growing up with nothing had taught me the value of stability. I never wanted to be vulnerable again. The Emily Harper Foundation became my passion project. We provided legal support to victims of family violence, funded therapy for survivors, and created a shelter specifically for young adults estranged from abusive families. Our first client was a 19-year-old named Sophie, whose parents had kicked her out for being gay. She had been sleeping in her car when she found us. 6 months later, Sophie stood in my office, tears in her eyes. "You saved my life," she said. "I don't know where I would be without this place." I hugged her and thought about my younger self, desperate and alone with nowhere to turn. "You saved yourself," I told her. "We just gave you the tools." The foundation grew quickly, fueled by donations after my story went viral. But law school was the real turning point. I applied on a whim, not really expecting to get in. My undergraduate grades were good, but not exceptional, dragged down by semesters where depression made it hard to function. My LSAT score was strong, though. Apparently, years of analyzing why my family hated me had made me good at logical reasoning. Yale Law School accepted me. Yale. I stared at the acceptance letter, convinced it was a mistake. My first day I felt like an imposter. Everyone else seemed so confident, so polished. I kept waiting for someone to realize I didn't fit, that I was just the unwanted daughter of convicted felons who had gotten lucky. But then we started classes and something clicked. The law made sense to me in a way nothing else ever had. It was logical, structured, grounded in precedent and reason. There were rules, and when people broke those rules there were consequences. Unlike my family, where cruelty had been arbitrary and unpredictable, the law was consistent. I excelled. Professor Martinson, who taught criminal law, pulled me aside. "Have you considered prosecution? You have a talent for this." "Actually, I'm thinking about family law," I said. "Domestic violence, child welfare, custody disputes." She studied me for a moment. Everyone at Yale knew who I was. My story had been national news. Some students avoided me, others treated me with excessive pity. But Professor Martinson just nodded. "Good," she said. "We need lawyers who understand what they're fighting for." I graduated second in my class, passed the bar exam on my first try, and opened my practice 6 months later. Harper Legal Services, specializing in family law and domestic violence cases. I took on clients who couldn't afford the big firms, poor clients, complicated situations, people the system had failed repeatedly, and we won more often than we lost. My first major case was representing Diana, whose husband had been abusing her for 12 years. She had 3 kids, no job, completely financially dependent on him. She came to me with a black eye and a desperate hope. We got her an emergency restraining order, then built a case for full custody and spousal support. Her husband's lawyer was slick and expensive, painting Diana as unstable and manipulative, but I knew those tactics. I had seen them used against me. We won. Diana got custody, support, and protection. Her ex-husband got supervised visitation only. When the judge read the verdict, Diana grabbed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing me." "Always," I said. "I'll always believe survivors." The practice grew steadily. Word spread that I was good, that I cared, that I understood what my clients were experiencing in a way other lawyers didn't. Years passed. My scars faded but never disappeared completely. The migraines from my TBI came and went, usually triggered by stress. I went to therapy, lots of therapy, and slowly rebuilt myself. Mom died in prison of a heart attack when she was 61, about 4 years into her sentence. I didn't attend any service. Dad was released after serving his full sentence and moved to Arizona, where he lived alone in a trailer park. Madison got out after serving her full 6-year sentence. She tried to contact me once, a letter claiming she had found God and wanted to apologize. I burned the letter without reading past the first sentence. There was nothing she could say, nothing any of them could say that would ever reach me again. Their power over me had ended the moment I realized I didn't need their love, their approval, or their recognition to define my worth. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to cut ties with family who truly hurt you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know.